So the question was, the millennial generation isn't really interested in walking into churches. Can you all hear me when I'm speaking? Okay. Isn't really interested in walking to churches. They're really looking at missional models. They're not looking at attractional models. I totally agree with that. So I'm gonna sort of separate a couple of things here. The call to action proposals we presented last night are not, and I tried to say this a couple of times, the silver bullet for reaching a new generation. They are not the silver bullet that's going to fix the church. What we're talking about here, or what I was trying to propose here, not my proposals, but speaking for them, are certain key things that we can do at General Conference. Ultimately, one of the things that I teach across the country, some of you have heard me teach this at your annual conference, is the old model in the 1980s was you start with evangelism, you reach out to people, you invite them to church, you disciple them, you help them grow in their faith, and then you send them out on a mission in the world. That doesn't work anymore. And if you're looking for a model, at least some metaphor that helps, you know, that old baseball diamond that Rick Warren developed, I don't know if he developed it, but it's been turned on its head. And we see that at Church of the Resurrection. You see that in your church. We invite people to be a part of God's mission. Somewhere along the way, they rub shoulders with people who are followers of Christ. Somewhere along the way, we invite them to come to a worship service, a Bible study, something else. They begin to find their life transformed. They find out Christians don't bite. And they find that they need what the church has to offer and what Christ offers. And then we send them out to even more bold and courageous mission for Christ in the future. So that's clearly that's the future. That's the present. What we were addressing last night was not what is it going to take to make every individual church grow. What I said was what it's going to take to turn things around in local churches is at the local church level and at the annual conference level, not what we can mandate from General Conference. So part of my response would be, yes, absolutely, I totally agree with that. It's just that was beyond the scope of what we were trying to address last night. Now, there are a lot of things we need to continue to lift up as emphases in the denomination that point in that direction, this missional focus. And again, I and a whole bunch of other folks, you all are driving that home. It's just that was beyond the scope of what at least the interim operations team was commissioned to address, and that was what are structural issues and what are major emphases, 20,000-foot emphases that we can give that might help the church have a future with hope. Okay, so the question was, the criticisms of the IoT report, what were the most valid criticisms, what are the least valid criticisms? So one of the criticisms, at least that gets lifted up a lot, is the lack of representation. And so I will tell you, before you get to General Conference, you're listening to what people are criticizing, and you're trying to figure out what of this can be incorporated in, or how can we adapt to that. So one of the adaptations that will be coming out in general administration is first of all, the 15-member board. That was a big concern for a lot of people. This was a board that was meant to be people with expertise in certain areas that might help the church move forward, as opposed to a representative board that tries to represent every constituency in the church. Then there was a representative board that would meet twice a year, but this 15-member board was meant to be a competency-based board of people who really can help us move forward. We've heard that lots of people don't like that idea. And so what you'll hear in GA is that really we've basically taken that 45-member board and made it the board. In essence, the connectional table. It will work differently from the connectional table, allowing more representation. That representation represents a variety of constituencies in the church. And so that's already, we've just said, look, if that's an issue, let's move it in a different direction. However, with that 45-member board, there needs to be an executive board. And so there will be a 15-member executive board that's proposed. And this is how almost every one of our institutions works. I chair the board at St. Paul School of Theology in Kansas City. We have a 45-member board. We have a 12-member executive board, because it's very hard to make decisions with 45 people. So that's one of the criticisms that's been lifted up. I've heard a lot it's too corporate. The model's too corporate. Anytime we want to criticize something, at my church it happens the same way. We lift up it's too corporate. We don't know exactly what that means. Maybe you do, but it usually means a whole bunch of different things to different people. And part of what I was trying to say last night is our current model is a corporate model, and it was based on corporate America of the 1950s. And we're suggesting that this model is at least a more effective way of moving things forward. So one of the things I would say that, I ultimately believe that the renewal of the church happens in the local church and with local church leaders more than anywhere else, annual conference or any place else. So the things that at Resurrection we do, Mike Slaughter and I lead the Young Pastors Network. I'm speaking at annual conferences. We produce resources and give them away. We do Leadership Institute. I think that ultimately matters more than the kinds of things we're going to discuss here. However, we are here to discuss, these kind of big picture ideas. And so ultimately the question that we asked, so when it comes to this structure, is which works better? To have silos, and this is a very biased way of talking about it, but to have silos where you have independent ministries who have independent boards and a chief executive of each one of those, all sort of replicating some ministries, doing their own thing and talking sometimes, not nearly as much as what they should be talking, or to bring those organizations together and say, now, why don't we work together? Why don't we take the strengths of GBGM and the strengths of discipleship and the strength of United Methodist Communications and whatever else, and let's focus them on working together, bringing their strengths, setting common goals together, doing strategic planning together in ways that might accomplish more than the current siloed deal. I see your hand, or actually he sees your hand. He'll call you in just a second. But the last thing I want to say about that was metaphors. So how many of you are in GA right now? Okay, so the fun thing about metaphors is you can take one person's metaphor and you can turn it against them, and metaphors break down just like the parables do. So the metaphor of the multiple boats versus the single boat breaks down very quickly. It's a helpful word picture, but if you try to press it too far, it doesn't mean what, suddenly it becomes something else. But the idea of having a team of people working as a team, as opposed to competing with each other for limited resources, that's the big idea. How do we work together as a team to accomplish more, whether it's young adult ministries or missions ministries or whatever else? We think we can do that when the players are talking in the same room and when there's one person who's holding them accountable in the end. So what does consultation mean? So I was on a phone call with general boards and secretaries, a conference call, in which there was at least what I would have called consultation. There was a meeting down in Dallas. Most of the general board secretaries were at that meeting with the IoT. I was not able to be there, and they were invited to give input at that process. So when I hear it said, well, we weren't invited or consulted. Now, part of the challenge is, so if I were designing this process personally myself, it would have looked very different. I'm one player on this team, and unfortunately, basically we had 9 months to develop the legislation that came before us. So I would have had a much longer, more consultative process, would have involved trying to get all the players on board so you can minimize the amount of pushback when you get to General Conference. What I would have liked would have been all the General Secretaries to say, we're in favor of this plan, just like the fellow from General Commission on Christian Unity was. But that wasn't able to happen. Part of the sense you get, and I'm not saying from all the General Secretaries, but was, we don't like this and we don't want it, so why would we want to help you design a process that's going to vote us out of business? And actually one of the General Secretaries told the IoT, that was a nearly direct quote, was why would we help you with a process that we don't agree with and we don't want to actually see happen? So I'm not saying they all felt that way, but when you hear, well, they weren't consulted at all, that's not entirely accurate, and I think there would have been more consultation, except there was a sense of, we're not really sure we want to partner with you on this. That's not my sense because I wasn't at the meeting, and I wasn't in the back room conversations that happened. So I'm only reporting what I was told from that IoT meeting. How does simplifying down, you mean the moving to one connection center for connectional mission ministry? How does that affect the local church? Well, part of what I'd say is, how do the boards currently affect your local church? And then I think it would get better. So that's a pretty simple answer, but I think if they're working together as a team, Board of Discipleship, Board of Global Ministries, Board of Church and Society, if they're working together as a team on strategic initiatives, setting goals, improving, so if Church and Society is working with the Board of Discipleship to develop the ministries and programs that are coming from there, to the degree that you intersect with the Board of Discipleship, that's going to be a more holistic approach than what we currently have. Now, you may not agree with that, but that's our assessment of the reason why that's a strength to bring them together as opposed to having the silos. But it would be curious to hear how much in each of your churches you do intersect with the boards, because most of the people I talk to don't seem to have as much intersection as what we'd like. I think in the Central Conferences more so, especially in Africa. But as a pastor of a local church for the last 22 years, I've had very little intersection with the boards. So, okay, so the question was, Where does campus ministry fit into this? And they are distinct from youth ministry and young adult ministry. And if we're going to raise up 2,000 young clergy, campus ministry is the front line for that. You didn't say that, but I'm saying that. And you agree. And so here's what I'd say. At IoT, we're looking at the 20,000-foot view of things. The next step in that, if that's approved, is that all of the pieces all the players have to come together. This collaborative effort, discipleship, United Methodist, campus ministries. A lot of this happens at the annual conference level, not at the general church level. But all of this GBHEM, all of these have to come together to develop a strategic plan. So what you're talking about is a strategic plan, which I think is really, really important. All of this fails without a strategic plan. And it also points to why we think having one Center for Connectional Mission and Ministry is important, because they all work together on that plan to say what resources and what areas do we bring, what strengths do we bring to the table to help this thing happen, as opposed to just assigning to GBHEM and hoping it gets done. GBHEM will do a great job, but it's better if everybody's working together on it. So it includes communication, it includes campus ministries, it includes student ministries, there's a whole host of things. But we don't get down to that level of detail. We're casting the vision and saying, here's how we can find the resources. Then the next step is to develop the strategic plans. Great question, thank you. I wanted to make one last comment. First of all, it's fun to watch the flurry of Twitter things, dang, I really sucked last night. And of course, it's easy to find one-liners. This is the challenge with Twitter, I find, is you can take a one-liner and make somebody either feel really or look really stupid. You can mischaracterize, or you characterize what you felt, but not necessarily what accurately was happening there. At least that's how I felt as somebody who was getting lots and lots of those Twitter hits last night. And I'm a big boy. I didn't lose sleep over it. But I do care enough to call this meeting today and say, let's talk about it. And there's lots of questions, and even when you make a 30-minute presentation that you try to share the other presenters did an awesome job. They hit it out of the park, and the videos and all that, you can't cover everything in that. And sometimes we attribute to other people the worst possible motives instead of the best possible motives. And one of the things I've tried to teach in Seeing Gray and when Christians get it wrong and all these other things is let's assume the best of the other people instead of the worst. And let's figure out a way to hear what they're saying. We can disagree. It's perfectly great to disagree. But let's disagree in a way that reflects our Christian love. And how would we want people to disagree with us if we were the ones standing up there making the speech and other people were tweeting about us? And I just would encourage you in that. You believe that. I know this is something I value in my young adults at Church of the Resurrection, our young adults at Resurrection. I just ask for the rest of the conference, disagree. Ask questions. But to be careful about. And I'm not chastising you. I'm saying, I appreciate it. I actually enjoyed reading the tweets, and I gave one back somewhere in there. I love the line, are you trying to scare us to hope? No, of course not. It was such a great, juicy line. I loved it. Whoever wrote it was a real poet. But no, I wasn't trying to scare you. I wasn't trying to give you hope. I was trying to raise the level of, you've gotten hope. You got it in the morning. You got it after me. You got it just before me from the four areas of focus and so my job was a miserable job. I got to be the oncologist to tell the church it had cancer. That was actually how I visualized this, is I have to convince you that this is serious enough so that you're willing to do something about it. Because otherwise what we do every year is it's really not that bad. And I've been doing that for 25 years. And I've watched the church decline by almost 2 million members during my tenure. And it's going to get worse during yours. And so my goal was to scare the hell out of you and to say, I don't want this to be our future. Now, I don't know if I did it well. Probably should have put that last video earlier on in the service. Some of you said, it was manipulative. Listen, when you're trying to influence people, you're always trying to figure out how do you speak to their head and their heart and how do you move them to action. And in the end, I love this church. I am committed to giving my life. I give sadly, more of my life to this than to my kids and to almost anything else, and I have a lot of regrets about that. But I really care about this church, and I want it to be here in the future, and I believe we have an approach to the gospel that really matters today, maybe more than ever. And we can't just say, well, if we just have enough faith, it's all going to be okay. If we just have enough hope, it's all going to be okay. We can't just listen to the fact that we started 650 churches in 4 years, and that they have a combined attendance of 100,000 while we lost 300,000 during that same period of time. We have to have our eyes wide open, and our answers may be wrong at the IoT. I have so little invested personally in saying we have to do it this way. I'm just saying we got to do it some way, and we can't just pretend it's all going to be okay. So in the end, 20 years from now, you're going to be standing where I am, and you're going to be up there, and you're going to be trying to convince folks that the church that's half the size it is today, needs to continue, and here's what we got to do. Or you're going to be celebrating the fact that, you know what, things are better now than they were when I started in the ministry, and that's my hope and prayer for you. Hey, God bless. Thanks a lot. See you.